John Mabry. I'm director of the Iowa Pork Industry Center here at Iowa State University. We are in the research and extension part of the university, and we work quite a bit with swine software systems, specifically in database decision making for the swine producers here in Iowa. Recently we've had an awful lot of discussion about reaching a magical level of production called 30 pigs per sow per year. This is something that's been used from a marketing standpoint by an awful lot of entities, and most of the sow management system software that's available to producers does measure this trait of pigs weaned per sow per year. But as we look at these traits to measure return in a unit, we have to think about just how those traits are calculated, because we're finding some of our commercial entities are using this 30 pigs per sow per year from a marketing perspective. And sometimes their way of measuring this trait gets perhaps a bit optimistic. So what I thought I would do today would be just to go through a brief history of how this trait's been measured in the past and how it's currently being measured, as perhaps a guide to better interpret the information and data that's coming from your farm. One of the traits we use to measure output from the farm is litters per sow per year. For instance, if you had a 1,000 sow farm and you farrowed 2,300 litters in a 1 year period of time, common sense would say you had 2.30 litters per sow per year. This is very consistent, very clean if you're looking at fairly long intervals, such as a year of time. However, if you start looking at shorter intervals, particularly something like weeks, then we know that sows do not evenly space themselves out with 1/52nd of the productivity each and every week. Instead, there will be some ups and downs as we go from 1 week to the next. And you can see this litters per sow per year variable change anywhere from a 2.5 to a 1.85, something like that range on a weekly basis. Now, the reason this has some importance is that some farms pay their personnel on a bonus system, where if they reach certain performance thresholds, they get a little bit of extra return. And it would create a little bit of a problem when the weekly variability would go up and down by that much. So as a result, when we tried to standardize the calculations of traits like litters per sow per year, the National Pork Board formed a committee called the Production Financial Standards. And they created a way to measure litters per sow per year and pigs weaned per sow per year that had a little more of a smoothing effect, so that when we looked at the performance from 1 week to the next, it was a little bit more consistent. For instance, in litters per sow per year, it looked at this as the sum of the successful gestation days in the herd as a percentage of the total sow breeding female days in the herd, and then annualized that. This was a very legitimate calculation, but when you applied it to a week or a month's period, you would have a group of sows that were pregnant during that period but hadn't farrowed yet. So were those days successful gestation days or not within the calculations? They decided that they would assume these were successful gestation days. And as a result, although we got a smoothing effect on traits such as litters per sow per year and pigs weaned per sow per year, it was a little bit optimistic, because some of those sows that were pregnant in 1 week might have recycled the next week or 2 or 3 weeks down the road. So when you started looking at shorter time frames for the trait of litters per sow per year or pigs weaned per sow per year, it got to be a little bit optimistic. It was still very accurate over longer periods of time, particularly 6 months and more, but for the shorter periods perhaps gave us a little bit of an optimistic measure of our performance. The other trait measuring output, like we said, that's extremely popular these days is pigs weaned per sow per year. If we look at the simplistic way of measuring this trait, if we had a 1,000 sow herd and we weaned 24,000 pigs over a 1 year period of time, that would be 24 pigs weaned per sow per year. Very simple calculation. But again, similar to litters per sow per year, when you looked at the week-to-week variability in this trait, it got to be somewhat up and down. and we wanted a way to smooth this out. The old PigChamp DOS, which is still kind of the standard that's used in making comparisons across South software systems, elected to go with the litters per sow per year as a part of this calculation, since it had been smoothed out to remove those week-to-week variations a little bit. So they measured pigs weaned per sow per year as litters per sow per year times the average pigs weaned per litter. And what this did was that, again, it did smooth out the week-to-week variation in pigs weaned per sow per year. But when you looked at it at fairly short intervals, it gave perhaps an overly optimistic measure of how many pigs were actually weaned per sow per year. When you start looking at this, sometimes those latter weeks in particular, after sows had only been bred for 7 to 28 days, they assumed they were farrowing, and perhaps they weren't. So we got a number that was probably a little bit higher than if we actually counted the number of pigs weaned in our calculations. The question that we get asked here at Iowa State quite a bit is, when you look at the old measurements of output, litters per sow per year, pigs weaned per sow per year, versus perhaps some of the newer measures, which ones of these are correct? And our feelings are pretty straightforward and perhaps simplistic. You can only sell litters that were farrowed or pigs that were actually weaned. So we prefer, if we're looking to make database decisions, we would prefer to use the traits of litters per sow per year or pigs weaned per sow per year that were based on actual litters farrowed over a period of time or actual pigs weaned over a period of time, and then express that on either a per sow basis, and then look at that as so it takes into account the breeding female days. However, this does result in some week-to-week variability. But as we look at this, again, if we're going to make decisions from it, other than employee reimbursement, then we would prefer to look at the numbers that use actual litters farrowed or actual pigs weaned. Well, one question that we get here at Iowa State, from producers that are seeing this magical target of 30 pigs weaned per sow per year, they look at that and they work and they work and they work to up the number of pigs weaned. Well, what we've got to look at starts with the question, do we really want 30 pigs weaned per sow per year? The problem that could arise from this is the fact that we're weaning a large number of pigs, but some of those pigs at weaning are quite small. We've kept them alive, but they may have weaning weights of 5, 6, or 7 pounds apiece. And when we move these lightweight pigs at weaning into wean finish barns, what's the probability that those pigs are actually going to make a profit for the producer? I think when we look at database decision making, we want to target our output to be the highest number of pigs weaned per sow per year that can make a profit after they're weaned. And this may not be 30 pigs weaned per sow per year. Your swine enterprise may be more profitable by weaning 26 to 28 bigger, healthier pigs at weaning, rather than getting that total up to 30 and including 20% or so of the pigs that are so small, it's very difficult for them to be profitable after they're weaned.